Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the gentleman from Pennsylvania, especially that you're a member of the Western Caucus joining us there, and pointing out the national implications of the massive wildfires we have out west on resources back east, on the forests that you have in Pennsylvania and the resources there. So
yeah, it's nationwide impact.
Yeah, and you mentioned many of the things that the livelihoods, the lives. You know, the other thing that we often neglect is the amount of smoke that's discharged into the air and the effect on people with asthma and other lung issues. I'm sure many have died as a result in our community. So it's a public safety issue as well.
It really is. If the gentleman will yield, our water, Mr. Speaker, our watersheds, most of our water sources start, many of them start in national forests. They're certainly in forests, but a lot of national forests. And with wildfires, you create a situation where there's no stability in the soils. And so where these wonderful, trout streams, streams that support life, support communities, support families with clean water, these wildfires, they basically caramelize that soil so that essentially the flash flooding, the runoffs, it puts all these solids within those streams, creates turbidity, the solids, the nutrients that go in there, so the impact of wildfires, as you said, it's the land, it's the air, and quite frankly, it's the water. And that's why we have to do a better job of preventing these wildfires to start with.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the gentleman from Pennsylvania for your comments.
I thank the gentleman.
This past summer, nearly 7.7 million acres have burned across America. Wildfires consumed thousands of acres in Glacier National Park. The Howe Ridge Fire in Glacier National Park consumed over 14,000 acres. I was there. I saw the devastation. It destroyed homes on the shores of Lake McDonald. These are historic national buildings lost to fire. Last year in Glacier National Park as well, we lost Sperry Chalet, which also had historic value and had created memories for thousands of tourists who had visited that facility. Our courageous firefighting efforts did save the main Wheeler cabin with great effort. It even threatened the Going to the Sun Road. I met with the incident commanders there and the brave firefighters at the Howe Ridge Fire. Last summer, we saw similar behavior. Nearly 8.5 million acres burned in our country last year. In Montana alone, last summer, Mr. Speaker, we lost 1.25 million acres. Just to put that in perspective, 1.2 million acres is the equivalent of the entire state of Delaware burned in Montana last summer. And I saw the destruction firsthand. I was on 5 of these fires, visiting with the incident commanders and seeing the devastation. In one county alone, we burned 270,000 acres, and we had over 60,000 cattle with no grass. Fortunately, we were able to work with the Department of Interior to get retired grazing allotments, and the CM Russell opened up to fill that need for those ranchers, but those livelihoods were suspended. The habitats were destroyed. Smoke hangs in the air. My own driveway in Bozeman, Montana, on mornings when the fires are burning the worst, we come out to cars covered with ash that we have to brush off before we can drive them. The air quality is dangerous and unhealthy. And even where there weren't fires, we saw smoke from the tragic, destructive California fires that filled our skies in Montana. As bad as the wildfires have been, I've seen the impact of properly managed forests. This year, when I was at the Glacier National Park fire, it was interesting to me as the incident commanders explained what they were doing there. It turns out there were 4 fires being managed, all started by the same lightning storm through lightning strikes. 3 of those fires started on national forest where there had been hazardous fuel reductions. The forest has been managed. 1 started in the national park. And it was such a stark example to me to see that the 3 fires that had been started by the same storm on the national forest where there had been hazardous fuel reductions, on the day I was there had been constrained to 200 to 300 acres each. And yet the one that started in the national park was burning over 10,000 acres. Now, I'm not advocating to go log our national parks, just to be very clear, but it's a stark example of the impact. I've been in eastern Montana, southeast of Miles City, and I've seen where the BLM has done forest management. I saw a situation where a fire had burned through a landscape, and in an area where there had been no forest management, no fuels reduction, no thinning of the forest, the fire burned so hot that even years later, it still looked like a moonscape. Nothing was growing. And yet, when it hit the managed forest, where the forest had been thinned, the fire quickly dropped into the underbrush, burned the grass and twigs, but not a single tree was lost. And a year later, that forest was healthier than it was, and yet the forest that had burned completely will not recover in our generation. This is a stark example. In other areas where forest management has been done, where trees have been thinned, the water comes back into the streams again, the surface water. These are healthier habitats.